Hey guys, we're going to be looking at triangles tonight. There's so many different kinds of triangles, just like there's so many different kinds of quadrilaterals. And when you look at them, you may think, oh, well, they're all triangles. But they're all actually different kinds of triangles. Yeah, this is triangle ABC, and this is also triangle ABC, but these two triangles are different. Look at how they're different. This one has all sides the same length, all angles are the same. We call it equiangular and equilateral. These angles are not all the same, and these lengths are not all the same. This is not equiangular and it's not equilateral. This triangle, gosh, it has a right angle here. These are all different. And so tonight's homework is going to be about classifying triangles. And when we classify triangles, we look at two things. We look at the type of angles, acute, obtuse, or right, and we look at the length of the sides. So as we go through this video, I want you to be sure to fill in your notes. You have a box at the top of your page, and you should be filling that in as we go. And I'll tell you when you're ready for the bottom half of the page. So first let's look at how we can classify triangles based on the measure of its angles. So if you look at a triangle and you see that all three angles are acute, then we call it an acute triangle. That's simple. An acute triangle has all three acute angles. Now, if they're not all three acute, then we look to see, is one of them a right angle? Because if there is one right angle in that triangle, then we call it a right triangle. Be sure to pause if I'm going too fast. And then finally, if they're not all acute, then we look to see, is one of them obtuse? Because if one angle is obtuse, then we call it an obtuse triangle. It's not possible to have a right angle and an obtuse angle in one triangle. If you don't believe me, try drawing a triangle that has one right angle and one obtuse angle. It's not possible. You would have to have more than three sides in order to close that figure, so it wouldn't be a triangle. So those are the three types of triangles when we're just looking at angles. Let's take a look at these triangles here and name them very quickly, hopefully. This triangle, when I look at it, I think, well, there's an acute angle and there's an acute angle. That looks to me like it might be a right angle. I'm not sure. Let me turn it. For my mind, I'm not very good at spatial visualization. I prefer working with numbers. When I turn this to make this edge, ooh, goodness gracious, yikes. Let me try that more carefully. Okay, that's better. When I turn it so that this edge here is horizontal, then I can see that this is not a right angle. If this was a right angle, then this square would fit there perfectly in the corner, and it doesn't. I can see that this angle is actually obtuse. It's greater than 90 degrees. Maybe you saw that without twisting the triangle around, but for me, I need to kind of manipulate that a little bit. So since that angle is obtuse, we call this an obtuse triangle. That's simple enough. When I look at this one, oh, even I can see that that's an obtuse angle. I can prove it by putting a little corner right here, and I can see that's greater than 90 degrees, so this is also an obtuse triangle. I can look at this triangle and see that that is acute, and that is acute, and that is acute. So all three are acute, which means it's an acute triangle. And even I can see that this is a right angle right here. It makes a perfect little L. I can prove it by putting a corner in there, a square in there. So this would be a right triangle. This is definitely acute, and this is definitely acute, but this is a big, wide, obtuse angle. So this is an obtuse triangle. Now, if you had a hard time seeing that that was an obtuse angle, one thing to do would be to turn this triangle. And when I turn it so that one edge is horizontal, then it's easy to see that, ooh, yikes, that is more than 90 degrees because that's greater than the corner of a square. And then this one right here, I'm pretty sure that's a 90-degree angle. I'm just going to turn it to make sure. Yes, it is. Double sure. Yes, it definitely is. So this last triangle is a right triangle. So there you have it. That would be classifying triangles based on the angle size. Now we can also classify triangles based on their length. So when you look at the length of the sides, if all three sides are the same length, they're equal, they're congruent, then we call it an equilateral triangle. All sides are the same, they're all equal, we say it's an equilateral triangle. But if only two sides are the same, then we call it an isosceles triangle. So if two sides are congruent, it's an isosceles triangle. I remember that because the two S's here, SOS, I think of that as this side and this side are the same, and this one in between is not the same. That's how I remember it, that SOS part. Side, side, and then the one in the middle is not the same length. And finally, if none of the sides are the same length, if no sides are congruent, then it is a scalene triangle. It's a strange word, scalene. There's only one S there because only one side, all sides are different, so there's only one S. I don't know if that makes sense to you. That's how I remember it. So taking a look at these three triangles, these little lines here are so that you don't have to get a ruler out and actually measure the length. If there's one mark on each side, it means they all measure the same. So if all sides are the same, all sides are equal, it's equilateral. Equilateral triangle. Now here I have this side and this side are the same, but this one is not the same. Some people like to think of this as, let me see if I can get a little artwork going here. Ooh. Okay. Bear with me. I'm trying to make these look like little eyes. Here, I'll make them kind of googly-eyed. There we go. Okay. So he's kind of a googly-eyed triangle. These two sides are the same length, so I put two eyes there, and we call him an isosceles. Now I know that's a weird word, but you can spell that correctly. When I write out isosceles, I say isosceles, because you don't pronounce it, but it's there, that little C right there. So isosceles triangle. And then this last one, none of the sides are the same length. I know that because there's one little hash mark, two hash marks, three hash marks, so none of them are the same, and it's that weird word. I think it's weird. Scalene triangle. Scalene. Bonus for tomorrow, anybody who can come in here and tell me, what does scalene actually mean? Where does that word come from? Okay. So the next part of your box, so on the second half of your paper, there's a place for you to write down a type of triangle and then some blank boxes to write down about the sides and the angles. So for that first row, I want you to write that the triangle is an obtuse scalene. And then I want you to fill in the box to show what would the angle be like and what would the sides be like on an obtuse scalene triangle. So pause the video, fill that out, and then press play. Okay, on your obtuse scalene triangle, you should have recognized that it would have one obtuse angle, like this right here, and that none of the sides would be the same length. This is an obtuse scalene triangle. Okay, on the next triangle, this is what it looks like. Notice it has two sides the same length and one side different, and all three angles are acute. So I want you to write down the type of triangle that is. Press pause, write down the type of triangle, and then push play. That would be an acute, because all three angles are acute. Isosceles, because this would be like two eyes looking at you. Isosceles triangle. Next, we have this triangle. Make sure that it's filled out. Notice there's one right angle. and none of the sides are the same length. So fill in what type of triangle that would be. That would be a right scalene triangle. Right because there is a right angle, scalene because none of the sides are the same length. Triangle. Your next triangle, take a look at it. It might not look like all the sides are the same length, but because of this little one mark here, one mark here, and one mark here, that means that all the sides are supposedly the same length. Just trust that. And notice all three angles are acute. So fill in that that would be an acute equilateral triangle. Your next example would be this triangle here. There is a right angle right up here in the top. We have two sides the same length, one side different. Fill in what type of triangle that would be. So one right angle, two sides congruent. That would be a right isosceles triangle. Okay guys, that's it for tonight's homework. You know your different types of triangles. You might need to study those terms, study that top box where you classify based on angle and based on sides, and we're going to practice this in class tomorrow.